What's a cool science fact you know? Astronauts on the space station have little to no sense of thirst. Most wear timers to remind them to hydrate regularly. It's a zero gravity thing. Sharks have been on Earth longer than Saturn has had rings. There are more combinations of a deck of cards than there are particles in the entire Earth. Not just molecules or even atoms, individual protons, electrons, etc. To put it bluntly, you can safely bet that when you shuffle a deck of cards, that combination of cards has never been created before, ever or ever will be. 52 factorial is freaking bananas. The average cloud weighs about 500 tons. 80 elephants weigh the same. Since 2018 it's now accepted that T-Rex was fully, or at least almost, covered in scales, with little to no feathers. However, they likely had Komodo dragon-like lips that would hide their teeth when their mouths were closed. But when they opened them, those broad pearly whites would show themselves, ready to deliver a bite force of around 12,000 c. Humans are likely the cause of the extinction of elephants in America. They used to live in California, and their range decreased as time went on. The last elephants lived on islands off the coast, and they were killed out in a giant fire that is suspected to have been started by some early humans. Whales were originally land mammals who lived and hunted on coasts that eventually evolved to leave the land behind, but then evolved again to become amphibious and make use of the land. Then evolution put them as fully aquatic again later on. Helium is mined and is non-renewable. Once released into the air, it rises up through the atmosphere and is lost to space. Bears lose basically zero muscle or bone mass in hibernation. Scientists believe unlocking their genetic code is the key to long-term space travel and zero-gravity conditions without adverse effects on astronauts. The Earth's core is hotter than the surface of the sun. The Eiffel Tower becomes 15 centimeters taller during summer. Albert Einstein did in fact have last words on his deathbed. However, the nurse did not comprehend German, so they go undocumented. Imagine it was like The Secret to the Universe. In a group of 23 people, there's a more than 50% chance 2 people have the same birthday. While dreaming, your brain is actively inventing an entire universe of locations, characters, and storyline. And yet somehow your brain is able to experience this universe and be legitimately surprised by it. It's hypothesized that a genetic muscular disease linked to the jaw muscle contributed to the evolution of the human brain. Our skulls start out with plates that eventually fuse together. In primates like chimps, the jaw muscle pulls on their skulls, creating stress which causes the plates to fuse at a much younger age than humans. Since our jaw muscles all have this genetic disease which weakens them, our skulls do not have the larger muscles pulling on them, allowing them to grow for a longer period of time before the plates fuse. It's hypothesized that this was a contributing factor to the increased size of our brain cavities, and as a result, allowed our brains to develop to a larger size. I recently found out that magenta does not exist. There is no wavelength for the color magenta. We only see it because it's the opposite of green. To elaborate, your brain actually only has cells to detect red, green, and blue light. So what happens when we see yellow? We see yellow because our eyes detect a mix of red and green, and our brains average it to equal yellow. So yellow light exists, but our brain is sort of guessing what it looks like, since we don't actually have yellow receptor cells. So what's the deal with magenta? Well, when we see both red and blue light, our brain tries to average that out. But look at the rainbow. The average of red and blue is green. But if you're seeing red and blue light, you're definitely not seeing green light. So our brain is like, this should be green light, but it isn't. So F it, and just makes up magenta out of nowhere. Brown is also similar. There's no brown light. It's just a weird combination of colors that your brain guesses on. 1/10 Europeans are resistant to HIV. Why, you ask? Because of the Black Death and the bacteria Yersinia pestis that causes it. Yersinia and HIV share a protein. At least I think it's a protein that lets them connect to the cell. Since 1/3 to 1/2 of Europeans died of the plague, and it was everywhere, there was a type of selection of people that lack that protein on the surface of their cells. The people that had that protein mostly died, and people that didn't have it mostly survived basic natural selection. The mutation became more common in the population. Skip almost 700 years and you have around 10% Europeans that are resistant, not immune. And I'm fairly sure it's only for one type of the virus, to HIV. You should still wrap your tools though. A 1-ton gold cube would be approximate 14 inches on each side and 1 gallon of gasoline stores the approximate energy of 14 sticks of dynamite. All objects constantly emit light. Tables emit light, for example. It's one of the ways that the molecules and atoms get rid of excess energy absorbed from things like sunlight, hot objects, ambient temperature, etc. It's just at a wavelength we can't see. And if I remember correctly, all we are doing when we heat things up to the point that they glow is lowering the wavelength to one we can see. When an atom absorbs energy, its electrons go to a higher energy state, but it can't stay in that higher energy state without energy input. So when the input is gone, the electron will go down in energy states, which releases the energy as radiation acolyte. Because the speed of light is finite, when you look up into the sky at night and see stars, you are looking into the past. The distance, in light years, of a particular star from Earth determines how many years it takes for the light that was emitted from that star to get to us. So the light emitted from a star 4 light years away from Earth takes 4 years to get here, and we are seeing that star as it existed 4 years ago. Octopuses are probably the most advanced species when it comes to abilities. For example, they can camouflage, have high cognitive capacity, can get through anywhere, 3 hearts, etc. If you travel back in time, you also need to teleport, because the solar system moves like 300,000 kilometers per hour. Infectious disease pathogens do not necessarily evolve to become more benign over time. A pathogen that requires a single, mobile host, for example person-to-person transmission, will generally follow this pattern, because burning through vectors is bad for propagating a genome. However, if there is some sort of intermediate stage like encysting for smallpox, or having a mobile vector, like for malaria, then there isn't a ceiling on virulence. This is why a lot of parasites have crazy life cycles, where they will live inside another animal, not really do much to them, until they get to their terminal host, and start eating them from the inside out. The easier something is to transmit, the more likely a disease is to remain virulent, or evolve to become more so. Sedentary lifestyles, as opposed to nomadic, for humans, allowing for increased population density, allowed for complex human culture to develop, but also many infectious disease issues. Atoms don't touch each other, and since everything is made up of atoms, you technically didn't touch anything in your entire life. Electrons actually move really slow in a wire. It's not like an electron moves at the speed of light. The only reason why the light turns on instantly when you turn on the switch is because they push. So the electron at the switch will cause the electron at the bulb to move. Domestic cats have caused at least 33 extinctions globally and kill an estimated 2.4 billion birds a year in the United States alone. Yet people all over the world still let their cats out, and governments still perform spay and release programs for feral populations, knowing they will continue to contribute to ecological collapse. Gravity works when 2 objects are attracted to each other. So when you, say, drop a ball onto the floor, we tend to think that the ball is just being pulled to the earth by gravity, but really the ball and the earth are being attracted to each other. So technically, though the movements are so small it's imperceptible to our brains, as the ball falls to earth, the earth is also being pulled towards the ball. Again, it's so insignificant that it's almost not happening, but apparently that's what happens. Maybe someone can explain that better, or tell me whether or not that's even correct. The Gecalopterus was the biggest scorpion ever, with 2.6 meters long. The second biggest scorpion ever was the Pterygotus. When you sleep, the neurons in your hippocampus will fire in a similar, but reversed sequence as they did when you experienced something. It's called replay. Some of those cells in the hippocampus are place cells, and they basically fire when you're in a specific place within a room, and will not fire if you're somewhere else in the room. The cells get reused for different rooms, So, if we look at all the cells in your hippocampus and know what cell fires for what place, we could trace everywhere you went from recording their activity. And if we record their activity during your sleep, we should see the sequence being replayed a bit randomly through the night. The hippocampal cells don't just code for place. It's more complicated than that, because they basically help transfer your short-term memories to long-term memories. All types of memories. The same replay thing happen with all the hippocampal cells. So, when you sleep, your brain is randomly replaying stuff you've experienced in a random order. Experiences that can be up to 28 days old. Crows are the smartest species of bird with the intelligence of a human 7-year-old. They can make lever tools to solve complex problems, use currency, visit their grandparents, and can remember a face for at least 5 years, and can mimic sounds they hear. They can also pass the snack test, a test where you offer them a small portion of food with the promise of a larger portion. If they decline it, human toddlers and most primates can't pass this test. They're also self-aware. Crows are so smart that they'll take something like a walnut, drop it on a busy street for a car to run over it, and then wait for a red light to pick up the seeds. They're also capable of using strategy like simple attack formations, flanking, and decoys. If a random crow is found dead, the remaining murder of crows will actually split up and find clues that led to that crow dying and try to avenge them. Probably the only reason why they haven't waged war on humanity is their ongoing blood feud with owls. Owls are known for stealing their hatchlings, and crows have passed on their hatred of owls for multiple generations. They hate owls so much that, if one is found alone, a murder of crows will go out of their way to show that owl why they earned the name for a group of them. Zoos can't even keep owls and crows in the same aviary without an all-out battle breaking out. If you save an owl from a murder of crows, they'll remember your face and pass their hatred of you across multiple generations and across multiple murders in the area. Expect to see all over your car, bundles of sticks on your windshield, and beak marks on your hood wherever you go for multiple city blocks.